This training is entitled Advocacy. Advocacy, what is it anyway? Advocacy is a strategic communication which aims to create social and political incentives to attract resources, shape policy, and remove barriers. Plain English, please. Advocacy is helping a person or a group of people to stand up for their rights and get what they need, helping support someone to make their own choices. Advocacy is gaining access to decision making. Advocacy means changing the power relationship between decision makers and people affected by their decision. Advocacy means making real changes in people's lives. Self advocacy, knowing your rights and speaking for yourself to get what you want or need. An advocate is someone who works with a person or a group to bring about change and to ensure rights are acknowledged, and advocate provides resources and shares power. Advocacy makes change. At any given moment in time, your advocacy and leadership are building a better and more helpful bridge from a weaker past to a stronger future. On any given day, your advocacy efforts are a link from a person's life of vulnerability to one that is stronger and less vulnerable. So, the basics of advocacy. One of the things that advocacy does is to provide the victim with information about their options so that they can make educated choices. Advocacy encourages victims to ultimately advocate for themselves while giving them a voice when they are unable to speak for themselves. Advocacy should be trauma specific, addressing the current violence and any consequences or issues that arise as a result of that crime. Do not ignore pre existing life problems. Rather, address them in descending order only after the most pressing legal criminal issues are addressed. Issues such as an abusive relationship, substance abuse, mental health problems, or financial troubles affect recovery and are thus issues for the advocate. It is important to know when to make referrals and which community resources are appropriate for follow up counseling. The overriding principle of advocacy is to listen and believe the victim. The healing power of this is extraordinary. Survivors do not need to prove they are suffering to win support. Advocates give unconditional support while safeguarding the individual's right to be treated with respect, whatever the circumstance. The unfortunate reality is an advocate may be the only person who believes a victim without question, comment, or blame, which makes the words, I believe you, and it wasn't your fault, that more powerful. The rare case when a survivor is dishonest is relatively unimportant. Clearly, the survivor is suffering on some level and has most likely been victimized in some way. Having the wool pulled over one's eyes on that rare occasion is a small price to pay for extending the healing power of unconditional belief that has helped so many survivors. Another advocacy principle is neither investigate or judge. Leave the investigation to the investigators. This means no note taking while the survivor talks about the assault. Keeping one's hands free non-verbally communicates to the survivor that you are not interested in taking anything from her, including a report, but rather are present as an ally whom they can trust. Advocates are the only first responders who have no other responsibilities and no pressing agenda. In addition to these basic principles, keep in mind teamwork. As an advocate, you will work closely with professionals in law enforcement, medicine, and other fields to meet the needs of domestic and sexual assault victims. Advocacy, specialized training, and teamwork have greatly improved the quality of care for victims. Advocates have provided and continue to provide a range of services to address the needs of victims and their families and significant others. Rescuing styles of advocacy not empowering to women. Sometimes we meet people who we view slightly incompetent, vulnerable, or in some kind of need of help, advice, or support. Very often we don't realize that our judgments create our reality of them, a reality that might not match the perception of others, even their own. When we do not take the other person's reality, perspective, and abilities into account, we solely rely on our own judgments and we may engage in the act of rescuing. We may believe that we are only doing a kind thing, an honorable thing, but the truth is very different. Rescuing is not an honorable thing. It is not something we do for other people. Rescuing is something we do for ourselves. It is something we do to prove something to ourselves or gain something for ourselves. In that process, we disrespect and disempower the other person. We act from a superior, judgmental, and self righteous position while creating a false sense of value, usefulness, status, and self worth. When we meet someone, we do not have the information they have, so we form our own version of them based on our judgments and preconceptions. We make up ideas and stories about them that influence the way we see them. So if I meet a single mom of two, I can think I can think to myself, what a strong person she is and how well she copes without support. I can see her independence, strength, and competence. Or I can see her as a failure. I can think about how she failed to keep a relationship going and provide a stable home for the children. I can believe she's struggling, vulnerable, and lacking. The way I approach her will be very different in both scenarios. Rescuing is based on the belief that my version of reality is reality. I don't take anyone else's perspective into account. I don't make space for any other information other than the one I created in my mind. Then I call it truth or reality. Nothing can change my mind unless I allow it. And for the sake of rescuing, I don't. When we rescue, we only consider our version of the other person. We create a one dimensional view of them that is solely based on our judgments and beliefs. Ask yourself, how do others perceive this person? How might they perceive themselves? What have they achieved in their life without me? What could they do to help themselves? How else could I perceive this person or situation? How would I see this person if I viewed them through a lens of compassion, competence, and love? Rescuing is selfish. If I come from a fear based place, a place of lack, I will perceive the single mother as um, struggling, vulnerable, and in need of support. I do not take the reality of herself into account. I engage with my story about her. She may be the most capable and secure woman that has ever existed, but if I listen to my story, I will perceive her as lacking and failing. None of what I do has anything to do with her, but everything to do with the story in my head I'm responding to. My agenda is rescuing in an attempt to maybe relieve my own anxiety or to make me feel better about myself. Providing any kind of support to her is not about me being a kind and generous person. It's about me wanting to feel better about myself. My motivation is entirely selfish. Even if I did not have the motivation to make myself feel better, I might have the motivation to alleviate a false sense of guilt. I might just be reenacting relationship dynamic that I grew up with. Rescuing is always about me and never about the other person. So if you are unsure whether you're rescuing, ask yourself the following questions. Always explore your motivation for helping. What is the intended outcome? Why do you want the outcome? Who is this outcome best for? And who benefits the most from this outcome? Rescuing is fear based. When I'm rescuing, my motivation to help does not come from a place of abundance, kindness, and love. If that were my motivation, there would be nothing in it for me. No matter how much we tell ourselves that it does, rescuing does not come from a loving, respectful place. The truth might just be, might just lie in the dark recesses of denial. There's always something in it for me when I rescue, and it's always rooted within fear. The fear to fill a void in me if I don't, the fear of feeling guilty if I don't, the fear of feeling shame if I don't, the fear of judgment and rejection if I don't, the fear of criticism and abandonment if I don't, the fear of being seen as selfish if I don't, the fear of feeling guilty that the other person feels bad, the fear of the outcome, the fear of rising anxiety when things are out of my control, and so on. So ask yourself, what do I fear will happen if I don't intervene and rescue? What do I fear others will think of me if I don't rescue? What is the worst thing that could happen if I don't rescue? What is it that I'm trying to control? And what is it that I'm trying to avoid? Rescuing is disrespectful. The other person does not lack in ability or potential. The other person is equal to me, even if they find themselves in a difficult or challenging life situation. Their external circumstances are theirs to experience and learn from. I do not have to rescue them from what naturally occurs. I do not have to manipulate or control their life or external circumstances to make them feel any different than they are feeling. If this is my intention, my belief is that they are not capable, that they are weak, that they are incompetent. None of this is respectful. So ask yourself, what are my judgments about the other person? In which ways do I see them as inferior? In which ways do I see myself as more capable and superior? Which boundaries am I violating by rescuing? And what do I expect to get from rescuing? Rescuing is disempowering. Helping is very different from rescuing, but we like to disguise rescuing as helping when it really isn't. If I believe I should or have to help someone else, I elevate myself in power and status. I believe that my abilities and skills are superior to theirs. I believe that my way of solving their problem, which again is a problem, I perceive, and who's to say that they perceive their situation as a problem. But I believe that my way of solving their problem is better, more effective, more helpful, and somehow superior. I put myself in a superior position of power, thereby disempowering the other person. Automatically, I make a victim of them in my own mind. The other person can now play along as the victim or set healthy boundaries by putting me in my place. One will play right into my hands, and the other will offend me if I set out to rescue. If I intended to help and innocently overstep any boundaries, I will not feel offended, rejected, or ashamed. Again, if I intended to help, it would not have come to from a place of superiority. So ask yourself, how will I become more powerful if I rescue? How do I expect this situation to end? Am I doing things the other person could easily do for themselves? How am I enabling the other person's sense of victimhood? Is it even my place to intervene? Rescuing is disconnecting. Maybe we were led to believe that relationships are about rescuing each other from the perceived evils in the world. Maybe we believe that in order to connect with each person, we have to be a victim of something or someone. If so, we will take turns rescuing. Sadly, there's nothing more disconnecting than rescuing. Healthy relationships require equality and respect. Rescuing contains neither. If I want to have a healthy and respectful relationship with someone, I need to value them as the separate and independent person they are. I must see the strength and competence in them. I must allow them to feel their feelings and experience the circumstances of their life. I must recognize my limitations. I must realize that I'm not as powerful as I wish I was. I must see that my way is not necessarily the right way and that I don't know what's best for everyone else. I can only ever know what's best for me, and even sometimes that goes wrong. So, why do I think that I should be in charge of someone else who made me the boss of the world? I must learn to respect other people's boundaries. Without those, we forget where one begins and the other ends. Paradoxically, when we respect our separateness, we realize our own innate connectedness. We will see differences in which we handle life and others as differences rather than problems. We won't have to judge anything as superior or inferior. Instead, we will connect our experiences. So, the difference between helping and rescuing. Many people struggle to distinguish between helping and rescuing. Helping others and contributing in a positive ways to each other's lives is something to strive for. It is the motivation that is the deciding factor. So ask yourself. No, we're not going to ask ourselves. Rescuing comes from a place of lack and fear, whereas helping comes from a place of compassion and love. Rescuing comes from a place of superiority, whereas helping does not. Helping is based on equality. Only we only we gain when we rescue, whereas helping comes from a place of no strings attached. It is likely during our lifetime we have adopted some extraordinary skills that will be valuable in many areas of life, such as parenting or the work environment. We're probably great at attending to others. We might be extremely competent problem solvers. We might be very understanding, patient, and tolerant. We do not have to deny or shame those skills. Instead, we can honor them by applying them in respectful, empowering, healthy, and loving ways to ourselves and others. Letting go of rescuing means learning to focus on ourselves. It means learning to turn inward. How loved and well looked after would you feel if you did this for yourself? What you've been doing for others. Turn the focus inwards and pay attention to yourself. Put your energy into yourself because that energy will overflow and energize others to do the same for themselves. Everyone is equal. Everyone is capable. There is no need to make myself a slave to anyone. No one needs a slave. No one needs rescuing. We have to learn to raise ourselves, and in that, we will raise each other. The aim is to support each other in our own growth so we evolve collectively. No one is served by being kept down. So, that's the end of this training video. If you have any questions or any comments or anything that you need clarification on, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always here to help.